Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. This is Jen Sugarmeyer, your host of Mindset in the Morning, where we are live 5 days a week at 6 a.m. Central Standard Time. But it's YouTube, so you can tune in whenever you would like. And here on the show, we talk all things mindset because mindset is constantly coming in at every point, at every decision throughout the entire day. It doesn't matter if you step in a puddle of water, if you're driving into the office, if you're making dinner, there is constantly mindset that you are dealing with, whether you realize it or not. And when you exercise your mental muscle, then you are better prepared for life. When life is throwing something at you that you do not expect, then you're able to bob and weave with ease. It is the most important thing that you can be doing for yourself. We know that there's this holy trinity of health, mind, body, soul. We hear about it all the time. In fact, we're probably hashtag mind, body, soul. And maybe we're working out and that's what we say we're doing, mind, body, soul. And we know that we, need to meditate and do things for our soul and for our spirit. But really, what are we doing for our minds? And you are in a relationship with yourself. And just like any relationship that you have, it takes work. Look, there is never a time that I will say, I have arrived. I don't need to do mindset work. I am constantly doing mindset work. And I tell you what, the more mindset work you do, the more peace that you will find. So it's just understanding what's up here, understanding the world. Well, I don't know. Can we really understand the world? There are so many things that I just scratch my head. But when you understand the tools that you have up here, you are able to create and keep the life that you want. So that's what we're all about here on the show. And this week we've been talking about expectations, and expectations are so incredibly important because they come into play all the time. We expect people to do certain things. We expect that our waiter or our waitress is going to act a certain way. We expect that our packages are going to arrive on time. We expect customer service to be at a certain level. We just have expectations all the time. It's kind of the rules that we set in a sense. This is what's going to happen. It's almost the playbook. Oh, all of these things are going to happen. But what happens when they don't? Yeah, it's really great when they do. But when they don't, you get disappointed. And maybe you get a little angry. Gosh, I expected that person to do that. They didn't. Or maybe you have resentment. You have resentment against somebody for just not holding up their end of the bargain or not doing what they were supposed to do. So the truth is, when we have expectations, it's a slippery slope that we can go down. And we know when we start getting on that negative path, it just continues to spiral. You're either on the up and up or you're circling the toilet. And we want to stay away from any of these negative states of being because they're just going to attract more and more of that negative state of being. And we don't want to be in fear, frustration, anger, resentment, anxiety, all of these things that we call suffering here on the show. We don't want to be here. They attract each other. So a little bit of fear is going to attract a lot more fear, which is going to attract maybe some anxiety. And so we want to stay away from them. And expectations, we're teetering on, oh, everything is all good, or my expectations aren't being met. So this week, we've been talking about expectations because they are so important. And yesterday, we talked about how to better ensure that your expectations are being met. And we talked about communication and how we spent the majority of the time talking about communication, because if people don't know, well, then they don't know. And so today we're going to be talking about, what do you do when your expectations truly are not being met? What do you do? Because remember, you always have a choice. Choice is one of my favorite mindset tools that we have in our toolbox. You always have a choice. If you say, I don't have any choice, my back is up against a wall, then that is a choice that you made, because there is always something. Sometimes maybe you just need to sit down and kind of think about it from a bigger perspective. What exactly are my choices? Jen says that there's another choice. What is my other choice? But our brains, when we start to just focus on one thing, sometimes that's all we can see. So, yeah, you might want to ask someone else. You might need to step away for a bit because you're just so close to what's happening. But you always have a choice. Remember that. You always, always, always have a choice. So, what do we do when our expectations aren't being met? Because we know that it doesn't feel good and we don't want to slip into these states of suffering, the resentment, the anger, the disappointment, the frustration. We don't want any of that. So, what can we do? All right. Well, we're going to go back first and foremost to the discussion that we had yesterday. Have you communicated your expectations to the other person? Now, I don't know what situation this is. This might not be an appropriate situation. Maybe you're just interacting with somebody, and they're at the workplace, and are they going to, maybe you need to talk to their boss. I don't know what the situation is, but does the other person know what your expectations are? And just because, I will say this, just because they know what your expectations are, doesn't mean that they're going to follow them, because they have their own set of beliefs. They have their own set of governing rules that they have for themselves. If they are working for a company, they could have legitimate rules and regulations that the company adheres to. So just because you want them to break the rules and that's your expectation, doesn't mean that they're going to, because it goes against company policy. So just because you communicate what you want and what you need, it doesn't mean you're going to get what you want. Okay. It doesn't mean you're going to get what you want, but you have a better chance, because as we talked about yesterday, people aren't mind readers, and we don't want to assume that, oh, you should know me well enough, so you should know what I need. That's not fair to anybody. We all have our own lives. Our lives are busy. So let's not put that you should know. Let's just be upfront and honest. But because you're upfront and honest doesn't mean it's necessarily going to happen. So if your needs aren't being met, first and foremost, have you communicated what you need to that other person? If the answer is no, then depending on who it is and what that situation looks like, it's probably time to have a conversation. There's no problem with sitting down and saying, hey, look, I just want to get us on the same page. And look, you have to realize that that person may get a little defensive. People that get defensive usually have some internal work to do as well. Or maybe they feel threatened, or there's something, and maybe you need to approach how you're talking. So my suggestion, when you have these conversations, sit down and just make it about the two of you. You want this to work for both parties, and you've got this expectation. How do we work together to get there so that it doesn't feel like you're pointing fingers at this person? This is a good strategy, especially if you work in, if you lead people for your job, because people are going to receive more when they feel a part of the discussion versus you must do this, you're not doing well. It's like coaches on the field. This is the last example, and then I'm going to go to the next. It's like coaches on a field. Good coaches are going to praise the people that are the kids or the players that are doing well, so that the players that aren't doing well can see and emulate the behavior that is being rewarded and praised. So when we come at people and we're super negative, there is something psychologically that happens that we get defensive, we clam up, we shut down, we go into a hole. And so that's not always the best approach. That's not for everybody, but not everybody is motivated by this. So soften your approach when you're having this conversation, because if you truly do want your needs met, you're relying on that person. Okay. This is very important. You're relying on that person to meet your needs. So you don't want to polarize them. You don't want them to just walk out the door. So keep that in mind when you're having that discussion. All right. after you have had this discussion, do you need to potentially adjust your expectations? You might think that it is reasonable, that it is a reasonable expectation for you to go into the gym on January 1st and come out with a six pack on January 2nd. And that's just not realistic. So you need to think about, are these realistic expectations? Have this conversation before you talk to the person, and also have this conversation after. Because what works for you, what you might think, might not be rational at all. And when you have this conversation with the person, they may tell you that's not possible. And so, because of the new information that you have, you now need to potentially adjust. There are some things that are just the ab thing. I'm sorry. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but it's just not going to happen. It's not going to happen. But there are some things, yeah, that maybe can change, overnight or over time, depending on what it is. But listen to what the other person says. If you, in your gut, still say, no, this is reasonable, okay, this is still reasonable. You have to be realistic with yourself in order to have this conversation, because if you have unrealistic expectations and you want the world to follow them, well, I mean, it's going to mean that it's going to be kind of lonely for you, and we're going to get there. But you have to be the one, because you're setting the expectation. You have to be a sounding board for yourself. You have to be able to catch it when you say, okay, maybe it is a little unrealistic. But people are going to help you to identify that when they say, okay, look, that's just not possible. But maybe it's something about them that it doesn't align with who they are, what they're capable of. I think so often we see people in the work environment. I see this, and leaders are saying, oh, well, they have to be able to do this. They have to. Yeah. But have they even sat down to really understand what the person can do? Do you know what you're working with? So sometimes, and this irritates me, we think just because somebody has a pulse that they're alive, that they can do something. And that is not true at all. We need to get to understand our employees, our kids, our friends, our spouse. We have to understand who that person is and what we're dealing with. So there may be some things that are just never going to happen. If you want me to be a WNBA player just because I'm tall, it's not going to happen, because I just kind of suck at basketball. Like, I can practice, but I'm never going to get there. I'll look like I could be there, but I'm not really ever going to be there, because not only do I not have the skill set, I don't have the passion for it. So it doesn't matter how much you put me out on that court. Yeah, I'm going to participate. I'm going to give it a try, but I don't have the passion like some of these women, some of these men that are out there doing this professionally. I remember when coaches used to approach me, and I was like, ugh, no, because I just didn't care that much. So if you're dealing with somebody and they have that sort of internal resistance, then are you trying to, I hate this analogy, but it's one that we use. Are you trying to beat a dead horse? Are you trying to make something happen that just isn't going to happen? So what do? Well, maybe you have them play a different role. If that role doesn't fit for them, maybe look at a different one. And again, expectations are everything. So we could talk about expectations of how you think the cookies should taste. Okay. I mean, there are so many different types of expectations. We have expectations on people, places, things, the way we travel, how, our experiences. I mean, there is just no one way. So again, it's hard to fit all of that into one conversation, because it's just so massive. But if your needs aren't being met, that, then maybe you need to make a change. Maybe that person isn't the right one for that job. Maybe that cookie recipe isn't the right recipe for you. Maybe that vehicle that you don't like driving because you feel it is too small isn't the right vehicle for you. So if you have different expectations, should you be making alternate changes within your life? And I can't make these decisions for you. But if there isn't a change, then you need to be able to accept. You need to accept whatever it is. If that vehicle is too small for you and you don't change it out, that is a choice that you make. Yeah, Jen, but I don't have the money for it. Okay. Well, then you got to save for it. You got to start working towards it. Some of these things aren't going to happen immediately. But if something isn't working for you, if it is not meeting your expectations, if you have sat down and had that conversation with somebody, if you've said, you know what, this is truly a realistic conversation for me to be able to fit into a vehicle, that's realistic. No matter how tall you are, there should be some vehicle that fits you. Then make that change. Make the change. If the conversation hasn't changed anything, if your expectations haven't changed, then maybe the thing that you're dealing with needs to change. And if it's an employee, it doesn't mean get rid of them, get off with their head. No, maybe you need to find a different position that is better for them, because that employee is there for a reason. I mean, the company, somebody hired that employee. Okay. So they brought value at some point, or the company believed that the person brought value. So maybe consider adjusting the position. And if that doesn't work, then you're going to have, to my last point, if things truly, truly are not working, and this is especially with people, if they're just not meeting the expectations that you have, maybe they're constantly gossiping and you don't want gossip. You have this expectation that around you, gossip doesn't work anymore. And guess what? Maybe it's time to ultimately remove that person, those people, those things from your life. And look, you could have completely, unattainable expectations. And if nobody's meeting them, you know what that's going to mean? It just means that you're going to have nobody left in your life. But if you say, this is it, I'm not changing, I'm not adjusting, this is how it is, you are certainly welcome to be that stubborn. You are certainly welcome to that. I can't change that. But realize if you are going to start plucking people off in your life, that all of a sudden you are going to look around and you're going to say, where did my tribe go? Where are my peoples? They're not going to be there because they didn't meet your expectation. So are your expectations realistic? Do you need to adjust them? Have you had a conversation with that person or those persons? Have they provided any feedback that you might want to consider adjusting your expectations? And again, it doesn't mean that you have to. You can continue to keep your expectations, and maybe they are truly realistic and you just need to find a new tribe. I've done that before. I had friends and I'm like, oh, this isn't working. And I've had to go seek out new tribes. We're always looking for where we fit. And as we grow, we change, and that's okay. So you've got to look for what fits you. So it's okay for you to do that. Look at the people and say, hey, maybe I just need to move them into a different category. I did this with friendships. I had an expectation that friends were going to call me and check in on me. And I realized that I had a whole bunch of friends that just didn't. So I recategorized them to acquaintance. And when these people became my acquaintance, it was okay. You don't have to check on me all the time because you're not really a friend. You're an acquaintance. And that's okay. You can have acquaintances. So just small, minor shifts doesn't mean you got to get rid of people. Just means maybe you think about them a little bit differently. You put them in a different position, maybe in your mind or in the office. And lastly, if truly your expectations aren't being met, and you've kind of come to the end of your options, it might be time to let people go because you want your expectations met. I'm not here to convince you that you need to change your expectations. I do think you need to assess if they're reasonable, but you own them. That's you. I'm sure there's somebody out there. There's 8 billion people. The likelihood of you finding that one person that's going to meet your expectation, I mean, 8 billion, that's a lot to work with. So I'm not here to convince you to change your expectations, but I do want you to be realistic and I do want them to be met. So you have ownership in this as well. Make sure that you're communicating and doing all the things. And if you truly need to remove people, that might be the thing that you need to do because there's only so many people that you can hire in the office. If this one person that you've tried to get a different job really isn't still mapping up, get somebody that is going to be able to help because you are on a mission, whatever your mission is. So that's it for today. Tomorrow is Friday. And so we have started a new tradition, and that is I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I'm going to open up and I'm going to talk about a topic and I'm going to not hold back. Not that I hold back from you, but I'm not going to hold back. So tomorrow I am not going to be sugarcoating it. We're going to have a great topic for you. If you've not yet hit that like button, not yet hit that subscribe button, go ahead and do that now. And I will see you back here, same time, same place tomorrow. Go be powerful. Think about those expectations. Start to notice where they come into play at all times in your life. All right. I'll see you tomorrow. Cheers.